Hi everyone. Still in South Carolina at the beach. I'm on the roof. It's pretty cool. Anyway, rocking my Red Sox colors to talk about the Red Sox. I'd actually done this video yesterday, but as is typical, Murakami signs with the White Sox, and then Wilson Contreras is traded to the Red Sox on the same day of recording said video. So we're trying it again. And I recorded on the Rays like an hour ago, but it's still December 22nd, 2025. And I'm gonna have a little chat about the Red Sox, what I think about ownership, Craig Breslow's philosophy, and what else will likely happen this offseason, and whether that's enough to truly compete. Because I think the goal with these big teams has to be to win a World Series, and yet, like the Mets, and again, this isn't let's dunk on the Mets, but if you look at what the Dodgers do, you compare it to what some of these other teams that are trying to cut corners have been doing lately, one's proven to work, and one is basically, as I said, they're cutting corners and basically being cheap. Now, I don't know that the Mets are necessarily being cheap, but I think a couple of contracts turned out to not be what they wanted, and so this shift has happened this year, and it just so happens that the Red Sox, as we're talking about, I already spoke on the Cubs, they just happen to do similar things. So today, not so much like for this video, but as things stand, here's more or less what the lineup's looking like. I'm going from my brain right now, not so much looking at a sheet. Got Narvaez at catcher, Contreras now at first. I guess you could say either Rafaela or Romy Gonzalez at second, Trevor Story at short, Marcelo Meyer at third. Depending on how you look at it, you could either have Roman Anthony DHing or in left. You could have Jarren Duran in left or in center, and then Wilyer Abreu in right. And then if the normal alignment is there, as in Gonzalez on the bench, Rafael at second, Abreu or Duran, Anthony going right to left in the outfield, then Masaki Yoshida is your DH. Now, I think having Casas out and Contreras in is an upgrade. I think that's pretty obvious. That begs the question, what do you do with Tristan Casas? Maybe you put him in AAA, maybe you trade him. Who knows? I don't think Yoshida's going anywhere because of his contract and lack of defensive versatility, as in he's basically a DH because he's not good enough in the outfield at this stage. So kind of limited in that sense. And in terms of another move for the offense, well, I think there might be two still. So yesterday I was mentioning Starling Marte, or Ketel Marte, not Starling Marte, goodness gracious. But based on the money Contreras is getting and the reluctance to give guys deals into their 30s for multiple years, I don't see that happening anymore, although they're still in a position to do it with the prospects and the pitching depth. So let's just assume that that's not going to happen. That leaves probably Meyer moving to second and bringing back Bregman as the most likely outcome, with the backup probably being a guy like Okamoto at third for maybe fewer years than Bregman's wanting and fewer dollars, or the wild card, I think, would be Bo Bichette. He'd probably end up at second, and Meyer would be at third. Those are all solid options. I think Okamoto is obviously the most unknown of those. And Bichette would want a longer contract, plus I think he wants to go back to Toronto anyway. So that's a bit of a hurdle, seeing as the philosophy seems to be short contracts. And even with the trades, they've been giving better prospects to have the other teams eat money, specifically the Cardinals, obviously, who are well into their rebuild at this stage. I think going to the pitching, there are a lot of starting pitchers, like as in 9, if I count correctly here. This is not even including Tanner Houck, who's injured. So they have Kyle Harrison, Peyton Tolley, Johan Oviedo, Connolly Early, Patrick Sandoval, Cutter Crawford, Brian Bayo, Sonny Gray, Garrett Crochet. That's a lot of pitchers. Plus, they still have Kyson Witherspoon, Jake Bennett, David Sandlin, and the minors. Oh, and Phillips Ianson, however you say that. So the point is, a number of those guys won't be ready, but there's a lot of pitching depth in the organization, like a ton of pitching depth. So that's certainly a strength. I also think the outfield, in particular left-handed bats, that's a strength. Even if you don't look at Yoshida as a serviceable outfielder at this stage and more of a DH, if you're forced to play him because of his contract, you still have Abreu, Duran, Anthony. And then Rafael is one of the better center fielders in baseball, although he's right-handed. So, plus they still have Nate Eaton, Christian Campbell, who can play the outfield. You could always go get another outfielder as well. So they're well stocked in those positions. Another prospect to mention in the infield is Franklin Arias. That's the #1 ranked prospect right now by the pipeline. He's the shortstop. We know how shortstops are in high demand, obviously, and they could either move to third or stay at short or move to second, but that's another infielder in the mix. So I think the big question is this team truly trying to win the World Series? Obviously the players are going to do their best because they're professionals, but in terms of spending, in terms of acting like a historic and rich franchise, I'm not sure they're at that point. Granted, there are a lot of young players still with either extensions already, like Anthony and Campbell, or with a lot of control, such as Meyer, Tolley Early. Bayo has a contract as well, although he's kind of making a lot of money for what he's doing on the mound, but that's a different story. What else do we have to discuss? I think a couple bullpen pieces are necessary. That could be putting a guy like Oviedo in the bullpen because he throws hard, but at times can have location issues, command issues rather. You could maybe ease in a guy like Peyton Tolley, who is kind of in the same boat. Or you could just have him in AAA, or it could be moved. And then, I think the big issue is filling out the bullpen, which I think a guy like Danny Coulomb would make sense. He doesn't throw that hard, but he prevents hard contact and gets a lot of ground balls. Compare that with some guys that throw hard, like Chapman still, despite his age. And then, as I was suggesting there, a guy like Oviedo in the bullpen instead of starting, since they have so many starters. And then maybe one more just to fill it out. We still have Whitlock and Slayton. Moran is like the only lefty outside of Chapman, and he, talking about control issues, he has a serious control issue where he's walking like 6 guys per 9 innings, which is unsustainable to say the least. And he probably shouldn't even be on the major league roster. Outside of that, I think the big question is, do they add another starter? And if so, who is that? And how do they go about it? Michael King was an option. There was that link with him being from Massachusetts, went to Boston College, but he stayed with the Padres for at least this coming year. There's always the trade Jarren Duran discussion / next sort of priority, where obviously, as I said, you have Abreu in right, Rafaela should be in center, and then your franchise player at this point. Roman Anthony's in left, so Duran's excess, plus he has, of those guys, the least control now. He only has 3 years. He's in arbitration, making about $7 million. So in theory, a team like the Royals or the Mets could really use him, and they have pitching in return. So make something happen for a guy like Bubic or Reagans, or maybe Sproat or Tong if the Mets are willing to give up. Tong in particular, they probably prefer Sproat. But yeah, there's options. Could always still revisit the Ketel Marte thing, although I think that's probably past at this stage. So yeah, I guess another question is, they passed on Pete Alonso, they passed on bringing back Kyle Schwarber, although with, as I said, the issue with the lefty bats, Yoshida, maybe that was more of a hassle. And again, they don't want long contracts for guys in their 30s. I think what it'll come down to is the results on the field and whether this pays off or not, because it's a way to prevent log jams where prospects and whatnot are blocked by guys who aren't necessarily producing because they're getting older, but at the same time you're missing out on the top free agents, in particular a guy like Pete Alonso, who would have been a perfect fit for this park. I think Wilson Contreras will do well. I think if Bregman comes back, obviously he was a good fit. Got to worry about his health a little. Same thing with Bo Bichette. With Okamoto, it's the transition over to MLB from Japan. So there are risks with all these guys. They're all, well, Bo's not 30 yet, but the other two are in their 30s. But it's a risk with any signing, any trade. So Red Sox fans, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you like this strategy? Who do you think you guys should sign or trade for going forward? And fans of any other teams, feel free to comment as well. But yeah, I think that's about it. It's super windy, as you can see in the background. So I'm gonna head back inside now. Thanks for watching if you got to this point, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.